In today's video, we have a variety of NHL news to discuss, including the NHL releasing its protocols move to Phase 2 of the return to play. We have a potential update on the draft lottery happening relatively soon. Plus, we also have some trade rumors involving the St. Louis Blues. We'll jump into all that and more coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have some more breaking news from the NHL. The NHL has released a long document outlining all the protocols that will be involved with it moving to Phase 2 of the return to play. Now, of course, this is just the actual outline of what needs to be done. It doesn't have a specific date, but like I said, it's hoping to be effective sometime early June, which really isn't all that far away. So somewhere in the next week and a half, approximately, when this becomes effective. So essentially, they're going to be allowing all the NHL teams to be opening up their facilities. There's going to be a lot of health and safety protocols put in place to protect everybody involved. Essentially, they're only going to be allowing 6 players to be returning to the facilities at a given time. There will only be one athletic trainer and one conditioning coach with them at any given time as well. They're not going to be required to wear a mask when they're either doing an on-ice workout or off-ice workout, but otherwise they will need to if social distancing cannot be something that they're able to do. So certainly another big step in the right direction here. Now, of course, another big factor with this is that they're not required is that NHL teams are not able to make this a mandatory thing for players to participate in. This is completely voluntary. And another tidbit as well is that NHL players that might be living in another city, for example, Claude Giroux of the Philadelphia Flyers is from Ottawa. If he's in Ottawa right now, for example, he would be able to make arrangements for him to be able to use the Canadian Tire Center or the Sens practice facility or wherever they're going to be holding their workouts and be able to access their NHL facilities as well. So any NHL players that might be residing in other cities that are not necessarily their home cities where they play will have access to. It might be challenging to accommodate all that, but it's certainly something that they've worked into the agreement here. NHL players will be given a COVID-19 test 48 hours prior to going into this phase, and it says that they will be tested approximately 2 times per week. And every time they're going to enter the facilities for workouts, they'll have to do a temperature check, and they go through some symptom checks as well to make sure that they're meeting all of the protocols here. So a very extensive document, all kinds of stuff put in place here to keep everybody safe and secure during this return phase. Of course, Phase 2, like I said, is voluntary. Once we get to Phase 3, that'll be more of a mandatory phase when teams have to have all their players reporting back to their NHL cities. Of course, Phase 4 is when they actually get on the ice and start playing games, which at this point is still looking like sometime mid to late July. My best guess is somewhere near late July, and they play throughout August and September with a mid to late September Stanley Cup being awarded. And even though we have the announcement on the 2014 format being agreed to, there's still some details that need to be worked out, as we mentioned here before as well. This is another big step heading into the right direction here, and hopefully we'll have some dates here firmed up sometime in the relatively near future. With this, or also with some tidbits on Twitter from Renaud Lavoie from TVA Sports, indicating he's heard that June 26th very well could be when we have the NHL Draft Lottery. Now, of course, that's very interesting if this turns out to be accurate and true, and we will certainly follow this report to see if there's any future updates when we have more information on it. But obviously, that would be before any games are likely going to be played. So how would they do the Draft Lottery? Would it only be the 7 teams that are not participating in the 2014 format? If so, those teams are certainly going to have some pretty good odds. They would form the draft spots 1 down through 7, and then from there, perhaps they'll have, as teams are eliminated, have them take the remaining spots like they normally do for the bottom half of the draft during the normal NHL playoff procedure. Hard to say exactly when we'll know that for sure, but clearly, if it's looking at June 26th, I would think that we'd have to have an announcement here relatively soon. Now, I know in the past we've heard that for the NHL to have the draft itself, they needed about a month to prepare ahead, but clearly this would just be the draft lottery itself, not the full draft, so I'm not sure how much time they would really need. I wouldn't think they need a whole lot of time to prepare, and if we could get an announcement maybe sometime in the next week or so to have something to look forward to. At this point, it's looking like the actual draft itself, unless something changes, will likely be held after the season's completed and once the Stanley Cup is awarded, assuming, of course, that all this is able to go ahead and take place like they're planning and hoping to be able to accomplish sometime here in the near future. But some interesting details on the NHL's return. I know we're all getting antsy here. We've had lots of news in the last few days about their plans to return and how everything's looking to go. So at least it's all giving some hope that we'll have hockey here soon enough and have a nice summer tournament to look forward to, and hopefully the players can make this return and have everybody remain safe and secure and get this season played out. Now, another very interesting tidbit of news that came out over the weekend was there was reports that former Toronto Maple Leaf and current Red Wing Dmitrii Timashov might be heading to play over next season in the KHL, but there's been new reports from his agency indicating that those are not the case at all. The Red Wings, I believe, put out some information on this as well, that they fully expect Timashov to be back with the team, and that he won't be heading to the KHL. I mean, even though Timashov is from that part of the world, he spent a lot of time playing in North America. Timashov spent a few years playing in his junior hockey in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League prior to being drafted in 2015 by the Maple Leafs. He spent about 3 years playing in the Leafs farm system with the Marlies, and of course split last season between the Maple Leafs and the Red Wings. Found himself a healthy scratch oftentimes with the Maple Leafs organization at the NHL level, but clearly a player who's had a lot of offensive prowess at the lower level, still trying to find his way. He's 23 years old still, still has some potential, and still seems like he is going to be remaining in North America to play with the Red Wings. Wouldn't be surprising to see him head to the KHL at some point if he doesn't soon find himself a regular spot in an NHL lineup. I can certainly see the appeal financially and being closer to home and all that, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. But if you saw reports of Timashov likely heading to the KHL, there is now reports indicating that that is not the case. I also want to discuss an article today on STL.com discussing the St. Louis Blues and some trade talk and rumors of things they might do once we hit the offseason here, because clearly they're going to have some severe cap issues like many teams around the NHL. I mean, they've made several other signings. The Blues have been one of the busiest teams during this NHL pause. Plenty of other contracts already looked after. They've got several other longer-term deals now in place for the blue line. Of course, they signed Justin Falk upon trading for him earlier last year. They traded for and then now re-signed Marco Scandella. Of course, they got Colton Parayko in the mix as well. Vince Dunn, another restricted free agent who's been a really solid young defenseman for the Blues, also needs a new contract, not just Pietrangelo. And they've got a lot of money tied up for next year already. Based on the cap remaining the same, they'd have very little wiggle room to sign almost next to nobody. They're going to have to clear some space somehow if they have any attempt here at keeping their captain in the fold. And this article discusses the possibility of those players being Jaden Schwartz and goaltender Jake Allen. So obviously to a degree some of this makes sense, but I can't help but wonder what moves they might go into and what kind of contract it's going to take to sign Pietrangelo. I mean, before the pause and everything happened with the pandemic, there was talks he'd be looking at a longer term deal somewhere around $8 to $9 million, and that's going to be getting a little rich for the Blues. As much as the Blues would probably love to keep their captain, and I'm sure he'd love to remain there, it might prove to be too difficult unless he's willing to take a much lower valued contract. But given the fact that they need to sign him as well as Vince Dunn, they might have to clear over 10, 12, maybe 13, $14 million in cap space in order to keep those players in the fold, unless they take smaller amounts, like I said. So clearly Jake Allen's making a little bit over $4 million. Jaden Schwartz is making over $5 million. That would certainly go a long way to helping things out here. But they do have some other contracts on the books that could certainly go as well. That might prove difficult, but if they can find a way to make it happen, like a guy like Alex Steen, I know his role is diminished, and he's become a pretty good character player for the Blues in a fourth line role. He's got one more year left on his deal. If they could find a way underneath that, that would certainly help out. Tyler Bozak, as much as he's been a good player in the bottom six role for them, he's making $5 million. Might make more sense for them to look to guys like that rather than a guy like Jaden Schwartz. But in Jake Allen's case, that would not surprise me at all if he was moved, as much as his play last year certainly improved. And Allen, along with Jordan Binnington, has certainly made a pretty good goaltending duo. It's a lot of money to have invested in your goaltending, and clearly Binnington only signed a 2-year deal, so he's entering the last year of his contract. It's going to be looking for a longer-term, bigger money deal, and it's not going to make sense to have your backup goaltender making over $4 million at that level. And they have Ville Husso waiting in the wings in the American Hockey League, who this article, at least it feels that he is ready to make the jump to the NHL, at least in a backup kind of role. Although the Blues organization probably would like to see him get a little bit more NHL time before he's the full-time backup, but clearly that didn't work out this past year. Once the NHL season gets back to playing, though, they are going to likely have expanded rosters and have a lot more extra players around, who so very well could be one of those guys, and being around the team and practicing with the team, etc. Even though it's not the same as getting game action, will certainly go a long ways as well to helping him prepare and get ready for a potential full-time role next season. But guys like Jaden Schwartz and Jake Allen make some sense. I mean, in Schwartz's case, he had a big playoff for them going for their Stanley Cup. We'll see how they do here when the season gets back underway. If they can go back-to-back here and win another Stanley Cup, then obviously that's going to prove to price out some players that are down. It's almost like being a victim of your success. That happens to a lot of teams as they have more success, and players have a lot of individual success, which leads to the team success. Sometimes you just get priced out and you have to move on if you want to get paid for your performance appropriately. But I think ideally Jaden Schwartz is a guy they'd like to keep, especially how he played in the playoffs last year, and we'll see how he does this year. But it makes a lot of sense to me that Jake Allen would be a prime candidate. The only thing is depending on what Pietrangelo would want to take for a contract, it might take a lot more than that to get that accomplished, and it's just going to be really, really tough for them to do. And there's obviously been a big debate for some time if all these other defensive signings is a sign that the captain is going to be moving on to a new team next year and that they're not going to be able to get a contract done. It is going to prove difficult, and GM Doug Armstrong is going to have to make a lot of moves leading up to free agency to make some space necessary to try to sign as captain, and these guys are a couple potential casualties here that could get moved out to help accomplish that, especially with Jaden Schwartz having a year left on his deal. If he was going to be traded, he would have a lot more value to doing it now with a year left than doing it next year near the NHL trade deadline, when his value might be a lot lower, and they might be in the hunt again for another playoff spot and another potential deep run. And it doesn't make sense to subtract from your team at that point when that's taking place. So let me know your thoughts down below. How do the Blues go about making space to try to sign their captain? Or is it all but given that Pietrangelo likely leaves through free agency once the season finally gets wrapped up? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section, and we'll continue discussing further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.